for anybody that is curious as to what is going on right now, there are how many? 4 podcasts represented in this in this podcast mega episode
Yeah.
mashup. And it's kind of a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of, first of all, how do you do a podcast recording, which is kind of what we're doing right now. So we do a sound check, there's an intro, and I know Sarah, Scott, Allison, I think Gary, you might have done this too, but we don't do an intro until the end. And it's actually kind of fun because then we get to tease what was being talked about. But so
That's
I've
great.
got
So
a clock
professional.
going.
That's
We've
good.
got what was it, Scott? 3, maybe 4 hours?
Yeah, 4 hours, I think.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna start the clock and now we do have a few discussion questions that we'll be covering, but this is more of a campfire style chat. Thanks, Jonathan Smith, for introducing me to that term. So it's not technically a panel, but it's more like we just got several questions that we're going to kick around about podcasting specifically for safety professionals. And I've got a timer going on my side. You guys don't have to do it, or Jamie, you can jump in and scream at us if we're getting close to time.
Is that counting? Does that require counting?
You just watch a number. I don't know if that's really counting, but
Okay.
that's what I do all day.
Looking.
Watch
I can do
numbers.
that.
You can look, yes.
And how long? What are my parameters? What do I need to time? And what's our timing?
We have, what was it? It was like, see, now I'm screwing
Yeah.
around with the timing.
I think we had 45 minutes.
Okay, so we've got 45 minutes. Let's do this. When we get to 35, go ahead, drop in the chat or message me directly that we're at 35, and then we'll start naturally winding down conversation at that
I
point.
can do that. It's already started. Clock has started, Gabe.
Awesome. Cool. Well, this is super fun. I don't think we've done some mashups of podcasts. I know that Safeonomics and Hard Hats Hart with Sarah, we've done that. We've had Allison on there. Gary, I think we've had a chance to talk at one point or another. And it's just a lot of fun. I think that the term podcasting can tend to be a little bit, what's the word? It can be a little bit intimidating, I guess. The running joke that Josh Russell, Allison Short, and I have, among the many other running jokes, is that I refuse to put the term podcaster in my LinkedIn bio. It just feels weird. I can't do it because part of it is that the whole podcasting thing feels very intimidating. But for those who have jumped into podcasting, for those that are in this call, what do you find kind of interesting or attractive about this particular medium versus writing a paper or doing a presentation, which many of us have done? But what is it about podcasting that's kind of special for you?
Writing a paper, it sounds like school. I don't want to do that, or work. It also sounds like work. So if we're just talking, then that's a lot more fun. It is a lot of work to make and produce and make the magic happen, and so that part kind of becomes a lot. But I think the fun of podcasting is it's an excuse to talk to people that you maybe know really well and want to talk to them about a certain subject, or you don't know, and you're like, hey, come be on this show. And so you get to have conversations, I think, that you wouldn't normally have, and maybe with some people that you wouldn't meet in normal work life, day to day. And so it's a cool kind of opportunity creator.
Yeah,
I would
you
second
have
that.
to be much more spontaneous as opposed to writing a paper. You write a paper, then it kind of sits there, then you don't know what to do with it, then you send it out. You never know if anybody reads it. But on a podcast, you can get that feedback.
I hate to write, so that's an easy choice for me. I absolutely despise writing. I do enjoy presenting, but gosh, making PowerPoints is a lot of work when you have some OCD. What I love about podcasts is it's really that casual conversation. I live on a dead-end road with about 300 farm animals, so I don't get a lot of chance to talk to humans. So I absolutely love being able to have some guests on the show and have some adult conversations and just be
Mm,
able to use the power of storytelling and podcasting, where it's a really organic conversation where we're able to dig deeper into some topics that we wouldn't otherwise cover and be able to kind of bring light to those real life examples and give
mm,
people a platform to share their stories.
Yeah, I agree. It's that organic, collaborative, creation, right? Where you have an idea, but you come together and it can take a completely different direction and then end up being something that you didn't envision, when you first got started. And I think that's kind of the magic a little bit behind podcasting.
Yeah, a lot of it is storytelling. And, as humans, we're really, really good at it. So why don't we do what we're good at?
Yeah.
yeah, I think for
A
me
key.
too is that it's I I'm actually a pretty introverted person. And so being in front of a crowd and doing a presentation is I have a difficult time doing that. But having a conversation with a couple people, great. It's so much more comfortable for me, and which is why, like, having something like this is actually really pretty straightforward, but doing it, I mean, it's a great way to process thoughts and, get a message out and things like that, not in front of a bunch of people. And then you get live feedback in real time, see people's facial expressions and things like that. So, but yeah, I think it's a great way to do it. And I mean, Sarah, you've done a lot more presentations. I definitely way more than I have. And I mean, how do you feel that difference? Does it actually help your presentation better? Does presenting help your podcasting? Have you seen that?
Actually, I find podcasts to be extremely uncomfortable for me. I love having an audience, having like the chance to present in person or even a virtual presentation. If you have people on like Zoom or Teams where you can get that real time feedback. But the whole idea of a podcast of kind of talking into this abyss and being recorded on video is so uncomfortable for me. I would say I'm terrible at looking at the webcam during podcasts. And so I never go back and watch the YouTube version of the podcast.
Oh,
But I do feel like presenting in person has given me that confidence and that capabilities to kind of just run on the fly with a podcast. Podcasts are great because they aren't super scripted. It is really just that conversation. So being able to pivot in real time, usually if you're doing that in a presentation, that's going to be a hot mess. So I love the flexibility of a podcast of just seeing where the conversation can go. But I still find podcasts to be a little uncomfortable, but it's a good growth opportunity for myself.
that's cool. I think that segues a little bit into even one of the other questions that I had. Is that, what did you learn about yourself through that process of podcasting?
So many
I've learned I'm
things.
terrible at using virtual backgrounds. I can't believe Jamie waited for like multiple episodes to tell me my background was backwards. I think it maybe is backwards still, even though I've tried to fix it a few times. I've also learned to keep all my windows shut. I've been recording podcasts during weaning season, and there's been lambs or goats or cows mooing in the background. I also have flies because I live on a farm. So people will see like this random hand movements in the video version of podcasts. So it's kind of a hot mess express of capturing me on video. But I love the community that it's formed for me. Like that's been one of my favorite parts of having the podcast is getting to know guests that I would have never met otherwise and getting to
Hmm.
learn more about their story and their backgrounds. And just it's been a ton of fun. So I've talked
Hmm.
enough. I'll pass it off.
I think one of the things I've learned is that it's okay to say, I don't know. Because quite often you're in a Q&A or there's something that put something on a chat and Scott kind of reads it out. And you kind of go like, oh no, as an expert, what am I supposed to say? Then you realize, oh crap, why not? Why be an expert? Why can't I just say I don't know? But I'll find out for you. Give me your name and number and I'll have a conversation with you later. So if you can do that, then it just kind of releases a lot of tension.
Hmm.
I'm going to air some Safeopedia dirty laundry, because
Oh, here we go. This is
Oh,
this is
wait,
my
let me
because,
get the tea. Hang on, get the tea.
yeah.
because and if you met Jamie and I, we're both fairly outgoing, comfortable meeting and talking to people, but everybody just loves Jamie. Everybody loves Jamie. And so when we were first getting going, I'm like, Jamie, you should be doing some podcasting. You should be doing some podcasting. And he never took the hint. So I'm like, all right, Gabe, Sarah, let's go and do some podcasts. So I talked to people, even Megan Trantner from yesterday. I first started talking to her before she was doing the videos, and she was saying, I don't know, I feel a little nervous. I'm having imposter syndrome. And I'm like, Megan, I'm doing podcast. You were the global VP of health and safety for Amazon and Pepsi and Netflix. You can definitely do some podcasts, right? So I think just taking that leap of faith and hitting the record button and just getting going, you definitely learn a lot about yourself, and you get over that hump pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
agree with that. And I think like the talking to a lot of different kinds of people, and those people that you think, oh my gosh, I don't know anything, I'm embarrassed to reach out to talk to them, or this is going to be an interesting conversation and I don't even know what questions to ask. I think that forcing myself to have those conversations, or being invited on other podcasts where I'm thinking, I don't know what I bring to this show, that kind of thing. You just kind of keep doing it, and then you realize, oh, I can learn from this, and I have something interesting to say. And so it kind of encourages me to go, okay, what story you have, what you're bringing to this scenario is valuable. And so it's been a really encouraging experience. And you don't have to have the perfect thing to say every single time. The most fun parts of our podcast are when all of us mess up or say something funny, and that becomes what's memorable. Or when you share an uncomfortable experience and everybody goes, oh my gosh, I've had that happen to me too. And so that some of that stuff that we're so nervous to be vulnerable and share has been what resonates most.
Yeah, I feel like there's this opportunity that we get with podcasting that I mean, I know, Scott, you and I have had this discussion before too, about having synchronous and asynchronous conversations. And even when you have something that's recorded, you can listen to it as if it's actually happening live. I mean, someone in the chat mentioned it's like a modern day talk show. That's exactly what it is. You get to be the fly on the wall and listen in on a conversation, and it sounds like it's happening in real time, but you can listen whenever you want. That's kind of one of the fun things that I really enjoy about it. And I've found myself going back to conversations that, especially if it's something where I was co-hosting the conversation, so I'm kind of, my attention's a little bit divided at that point. I want to go back and listen to what actually was discussed, and then I find myself learning something out of that conversation that I might have missed earlier.
Yeah, I think you're never going to get perfection, and you're always going to, finish the episode and go, oh, I wish I asked this question, or I wish I asked that question. So again, it's just kind of jumping in and getting those conversations going, like Gary was saying, telling a story, because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, I think
I
there's.
always forget to give.
Oh,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Gabe.
Sarah. No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I always forget to give Scott a chance to get his 2 cents in during our podcast. I just get so focused on our guests that I forget Scott's my co-pilot and partner in crime for Hard Hats
That's
and Hart.
funny.
So I always try to remember to give him an opportunity.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Gary, I had a question for you specifically, because in the format of your podcast, you do a lot of research, it seems like, before you are recording an episode. When you're launching it, your content is solid. How much prep does it actually take you to do an episode?
Well, what I'm doing right now, and just so people can see, I'm running a show with Scott, and it's called The Uncertainty Of. So I'm exploring the space of complexity, anthropology, intersection with safety, to kind of see which way we're going to go with that. A lot of the stuff that I talk about, Gabe, has been researched before. So it's always not brand new stuff, although every day I seem to learn something new about the subject. And so what I do in preparation is I do put a script together. But in many cases, it's like, reason why we create plans so that we know what to change when they fall apart. So the script is the same thing. I do have a script, and Scott knows what the scripts are like because I share them in advance, so he knows where we are for the 1 hour show. And there are times we've been on there, and because of somebody on the chat ask a question, you kind of go with the flow. And you may or may not come back to something you had in your script, but that's okay. Only Scott and I and the guests maybe know that, but the rest of the people don't know that we missed something. And it does kind of all fit together. So yeah, I like to prepare. So there is a fair bit of research, and a lot of stuff that I research, I then put on my website. And that's the real reason why I do these podcasts and I do a series, is so that one, Safeopedia is really great because they offer this platform so all your knowledge hangs around for a long time for people can search. We also put it on YouTube, which has the bigger searching. And the whole idea is that, okay, how can we share information and make it really easy for people to kind of find it?
Yeah,
I think that's something that's in.
We're terrible, Gabe. I was just going to say
Okay,
that's
go
part of
for
my
it.
passion for podcasting is the ability to share information and make it so accessible for individuals. I don't want to keep talking about the farm, but before we bought our farm, we listened to so many farming podcasts, and the lessons learned, the mistakes that people made were so critical into helping our journey be more successful. And so having the opportunity to do that in the safety space is something I absolutely love, especially our podcast is really focused on emerging technology and using a human-centered approach when implementing technology. So being able to share some of those lessons learned and epic failures on a broader audience and share the stories that don't often get talked about is a huge passion of mine and something I really love about the opportunity to have our podcast.
Something that I really like about the format, which I agree with what you're saying, Sarah and Gary as well, and not just having the conversations that are maybe it's a little bit more comfortable to do it this way versus writing an article or doing something like that. I think also the idea of your audience, it doesn't have to be the entire world sort of thing. I was even thinking, for someone, let's say a safety manager in your organization, if you have a company specific, podcast or show, it's a great way to have some of those conversations with your team and give them info that they can reference back to as they're driving to and from the job site or when they're, they've got a few minutes to spare. And it doesn't have to be something like, an hour long scripted podcast. Those are great too. But sometimes it's even just like a 15-minute snippet that you can have, or a 10-minute concept or message that people can go back and reference. And it's a great way to get a message out there in a different forum.
Yeah, and I think, just tying back to Allison's earlier comments too. I mean, it's a great opportunity for me to talk to people that I think are very interesting and that, deserve their 15 minutes of fame and have that discussion, with them, because it's really not like, I mean, Gabe, you and I joked around about how we're not even sure if anybody listens to the podcast,
Yeah, I think we said our moms listen.
yeah, and it's really not about that, right? Like I think that if you're setting out to try to be a podcast celebrity, then that's probably a really tough slog, But if you're setting out just to have really interesting conversations, enjoy the process, enjoy the experience, then I think you're going to have some success. And I mean, it's always amazing, when we're talking to people and they're like, "Oh, I listened to that episode," and you're like, "Oh my God, somebody actually listens to that," right? So it is rewarding to hear that people do enjoy it, but you have to, I think, enjoy it first and have conversations and interactions that kind of fill your cup, right?
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And I mean, so there's Allison and I are both reading a book right now that it's Linchpin by Seth Godin. And there's a chapter in there. I'm not sure if you've gotten to it yet, Allison, but it's talking about launching a project that, the ones that do really well are the ones that can actually ship. To Gary's point, it's like you can have a plan and do a bunch of planning, but if you can't execute it, the plan doesn't really matter. So, I mean, in this case, let's say there are people in the chat or they're attending the conference over the last few days and they think, wow, the whole podcasting thing sounds kind of fun. I know Jonathan Smith dropped this into the chat too, that he wanted to start one at one point and ran into some difficulties. What are some words of advice that you would have for people that are wanting to start their own podcast?
Be a guest on Hard Hats and Hart and get your foot in the door and get started. We're always looking for fun
100%.
guests. I will say it's like there's a stickiness to doing podcasts. Once you have a podcast, you get invited to do a whole bunch of other podcasts. So if you want to give it a whirl, let's chat. We'd love to have some other guests, especially from our Safety Connect audience.
Nice.
But I think just getting started, kind of that planning piece. I'm a project manager by training, but I don't like to talk about it because it's pretty boring. But being able to have an idea of what are you going to talk about? What's the main theme of your podcast? Kind of what's your vision for that? And then just jumping in. You don't have to have really fancy technology or background, obviously. You can just kind of get started pretty casually. My other advice is partner with a great partner like Safeopedia because their team makes it so easy for me to just show up. I've always wanted to have a podcast on farm topics, but that means I would have to produce it all myself and figure out all the logistical things that Scott and Jamie's team takes care of and makes it pretty seamless for me.
I'll second that, Sarah. It's made it really easy being on Safeopedia. Really has.
Did people invite you to be on their podcast, Sarah? I don't get invited.
It was really easy to work with Safeopedia. Like it's just been a slog. So no,
I
I'm
know
just
they
kidding.
charge you a lot of money, Gabe, but I got a good deal from them.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, I'll jump off what Sarah said and talking about, I often think that the boring stuff, the people that think, oh, the job I do is not very interesting. It's just XYZ. Like sometimes when people are super passionate about that really, really boring, lame stuff on a podcast, that becomes incredibly fascinating. So I think it's like an encouragement to people, especially if you're doing this in your own workplace or something, or thinking about doing it. You can make the really boring stuff, if you're passionate and excited about what you're talking about, that can be super interesting. So you don't have to come up with some crazy shtick or idea or thing to be able to have a cool podcast. Like I think just kind of lean into that weird niche and it can be successful.
Well, that's where I think that the whole launching a podcast, even or just in your company, let's say, I mean, of course, get the okay from HR, your legal team, or whoever if you want to keep your job, but you can go ahead and just have something that is specific to your company. And there's always inside jokes that people know of, or things that you all kind of want to commiserate on. Great way to do that. It's a ton of fun. I know I've enjoyed just going and doing it. I mean, to your point, Sarah, I was a guest on a couple different podcasts before deciding to start one or a couple of them. And that was a great way to kind of get the feel of the medium first. And when I realized it was just, oh, we're having a conversation, I actually really enjoyed that. And then of course, like partnering with other people is always really good. And what was really neat was, when like Scott and I have known each other for quite some time, Allison and Josh Russell and I have known each other for quite some time. And so when the idea came up, I mean, Allison was the one that brought it up about illusion of safety and saying, hey, would you like to, what do you think about starting a podcast? And we're just like, I have no idea how that goes, but sure, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And just start, just give it a shot.
And it's pretty easy if you're like, I hate this. Once you start it, it just goes into the ether, That's the other piece of it. Will be encouraging, but I'm just saying,
That is the grim reality, though, is that there is a lot of market saturation out there. If you do Google safety podcast, I mean, you can scroll for a long, long, long time. And how do you pick and choose? And so, I was thinking like, okay, originally when I started podcasting, it was like, is it just audio? Oh no, you can do video as well. Because I was thinking of, the podcasts I listen to are when I commute home from work, right? So what else you're going to listen to? Well, instead of listening to music, you can listen to somebody talking about safety, or in my case, mainly sports. So that kind of gets you do have a bit of a captive audience, which is really nice. And obviously during COVID, we really had a captured, captive audience. And that has allowed you to really kind of like get out there and be in front of people and maybe get some stickiness, attract some eyeballs sort of thing. But I do realize that podcast fatigue can be an issue as well. So I think we got to respect that, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, you figure you're putting your time and effort into something. It should be worthwhile for you. And then if someone listens in, like, for illusion of safety, the three people that listen in are giving us their attention and time in that 30 minutes that we're doing it. And I respect that. I respect what the audience is doing, and I'm competing against a bunch of other stuff to get their attention. If someone actually listens to it, I'd like something that is actually worthwhile to listen to. And it starts off with something that I actually enjoy too.
I've had occasions, okay, where I've done a presentation back in 2018, stuck it up on YouTube, never thought about it again. Next thing, I got an email, somebody saying yesterday, thank you for putting that up on YouTube. That was like 6 years later or whatever. So the neat thing about it, if it's always available, you can always go back to it. And who was it that said you've got to repeat your message 7 times? Didn't we hear that from somebody? Right. So if you can do a podcast, then you can have it on Safeopedia, for example, as a platform. People can always go back to it, maybe once, twice, 3 times.
Well, I think that because we do video and then audio, right? So accessibility, you can watch it on YouTube, you can listen to it on the podcast platform, and just accessible. And Jonathan was talking about, Jonathan or Randy maybe were talking about micro content, right? So again, if it's in that format, we can chop it up and create some micro content, but also people can fast forward, rewind. It's a format that's a little bit easier to review or mark that spot that you want to re-listen to. And I was just going to say, as far as popularity goes, and your comment, Gary, Brian, who didn't want to come on because he's not a podcaster but does videos. He did a simple video for, I mean, he's done a number of them, and he continues to them. He's got a great Halloween one. If you haven't seen it, you got to check out Brian McWhorter and check out his Halloween podcast. But he did, like, what's the difference between occupational health and occupational safety? And he did that 8 years ago, and it's had 14,000 listens on the Safeopedia YouTube channel, right? So you never know, what's going to resonate, and it's a great way to experiment and put different shorter, longer form content out there, video, audio, or both, and see what resonates with people.
Isn't the term now called shorts? They can put on a Google or YouTube short. I found
Yeah.
That's what my wife tells me anyway. She just watches all the shorts. So.
Yeah, I see comments in the chat about talking about equipment and things like that. And we could nerd out over all the different types of equipment that you could possibly use. But I would say for me personally, the equipment wasn't that big of a deal for me. I actually have a bank of videos that I had recorded of me just basically, I wanted to see, could I talk for 10 minutes about my day? And just even having a camera on me and recording and then listening to myself talk, it was super awkward for the first, no, it wasn't 10 minutes. It was like 1 minute. I wanted to see if I could actually convey a message in 1 minute. And it was very, very awkward. And I purposed to do this for, I think it was 2 weeks, and do it every day and see what happened. I think that's the biggest hurdle, like more than figuring out what is the kind of mic you want to use and how do you want to do video or not? Just even getting comfortable with how you get a message across and comfortable with hearing your own voice is also kind of wild.
I'm just
I
going
never-
to disagree. I think equipment is most important. This is my, can you see it? My $30 microphone and my, oh, you can't see it because I got a box of light bulbs as the microphone stand. You know, so
Yeah, that's a good, what is your mic and your laptop actually sitting on top of? That's a fun game.
high tech.
Mine's propped up on a beaker. Shout out to my organic chemistry days, a little remnants from Oregon State University's Chem Lab. Probably had to pay for it in my student fees somewhere, but it brings me joy every time I see that. I'm with Gabe. I think it's really uncomfortable to hear my own voice. Another reason why I never go back and listen to our podcasts as much as I'd love to hear how they turn out. It kind of makes me cringe when I hear my own voice. So I think that and just getting comfortable being recorded. As much speaking and presenting I've done, I find it to be really awkward to be recorded. And I have like a little bit of challenges with that, but I saw a comment about authenticity, and that's a great point about the podcast is just being able to be your true self and not being afraid to let that show in your podcast, because that's what people are really looking for with a podcast versus a super scripted life. So just being okay with having a weird voice when you listen to yourself recorded, having awkward facial expressions like I'm the queen of, but just getting out there and doing it.
Well, I'm looking for the AI that can take my voice and convert that into a James Earl Jones voice, and I can just overlay that.
Yeah.
It's out there. It's out there.
I was gonna say.
I prefer the Morgan Freeman voice
Yeah.
filter.
Yeah.
That'd be
There you go.
awesome. Oh, it's funny. So as we're kind of starting to wind down a little bit and in some of the discussion too, I had some random question that Sarah, you made me think about this just right now. How many of you listen to your podcast after it's been released? That's a no from Sarah.
No, I do.
Gary,
I-
you do? All right.
Yeah, I
I,
listen because I forget what I say, like as soon as we record it, it's out of my brain. And so then I'm like, oh, let's go back and find out what happened.
Fun fact about me is actually I don't enjoy listening to podcasts. I'm like the queen of ADHD, so I can't stay focused on a podcast. So it's not just my podcast I don't listen to. I listen to very few podcasts in my real life, personal
It's
life.
funny. Just listen at 2.5 times speed.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
get through it.
That's it.
That's the
sounds better.
voice AI, you change your voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, have you ever done
Oh,
that?
man.
Have you kind of said, oh, my voice sounds crappy at 1.0? Oh, 1.5 is not bad. Oh, 2 is
That's pretty
better.
cool.
Yeah, I sound
Oh,
much
man.
better at 1.2 at least,
It's funny. I have the and if Josh Russell was on here, he would do the same thing too. But Josh does all our editing, and so he has to listen to the raw audio and edit it like very, very closely. And I'll listen to the raw audio just out of curiosity, and then I'll usually compare it against what the final product was afterwards. I really didn't like that initially, but then I started to find little vocal tics that I would do that I thought, gosh, I didn't know I did that before.
Yeah.
I'm going to change that. And if you listen to some of the early episodes of Illusion of Safety, you'll notice I have probably 8 or 9 different conversation strings that I'll jump between as I'm doing it. And I cut that down to like 3 now. So it doesn't sound so manic.
Josh is really happy.
Yeah.
One
was like,
thing
not-
you discover, because you do a lot of your own editing, is that when you do watch a YouTube and you're watching somebody just deliver some sort of a little snippet, you see his head kind of like jump different spots. Then you realize, oh, I know what's happening. They're actually editing out somewhere they screwed up. So I don't feel so bad because I thought I had to had this nice smooth look. No, it's okay to jump around.
Or it's okay to just have your mess ups be there and
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Agreed. I mean, the stuff that got edited out of some of our recordings they're just gold. We'll revisit them someday.
Gold with an asterisk.
We need a podcast blooper episode of all
Gold.
the edits out.
I'll take
Gold
some
question
bloopers.
mark? Oh man. No, it's fun. I really do enjoy it. And I mean to Allison and Sarah's comments also, it does give you a great opportunity to talk to some really neat people. I mean, everybody that's in here, we've all had chances to talk, and I don't think we would have had that opportunity had it not been for that invitation or reaching out to someone saying like, "Hey, I have a podcast." Don't have to say that it just started, 2 episodes ago, but I have a podcast and I would love to have you as a guest on the show. We've done that before with Illusion of Safety, and the three of us gave this like it was a challenge, I think, to the three of us. Correct me if I'm wrong, Allison. Where we're just like, we're going to reach out to some people that we are never going to have a chance to talk to. I mean, it'd be a miracle if they actually got on this podcast. And we actually landed a couple people, which was wild. It was just nuts.
It's an
But it's a great way
encouragement.
to
You're like,
talk to
reach
people.
out, reach
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
People like to talk about themselves.
Yeah,
Before
absolutely.
I did the Uncertainty show, my first venture with Safeopedia was Meet the Author. So we did that,
yeah.
and we ran that for 2 years. And that was fun because, again, it was like an online book club, but instead of just having us chat about the book, it was suggested, why don't we bring the author on and have a chat with the author? And I had a couple of, like, I'm going to reach out and ask that person. Whoa. And I did. And that person said, thank you very much for the opportunity. When is it going to be? And let's have at it. So like, you can be pleasantly surprised.
I have to remind myself when we're recording that it's that I'm actually co-hosting, because half the time I'm sitting there listening to our guest talking. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And then, oh shoot, I gotta jump in with a question and say something. I'm the first audience. So it's pretty fun. But I mean, it is really it's a great medium. Gary, to your point as well, there are a lot of safety podcasts that are out there. And it's kind of a double-edged sword in a sense. Sometimes you'll have to slug through quite a bit of mediocre content to find one that really resonates with you. But I mean, here's my plug for Safeopedia is that there's a lot of there's quite a few different shows that Safeopedia has on, and a lot of different content. Give it a shot. You guys have one channel, and there's a bunch of different shows that are on it. It's a great way to see what clicks with you.
Time check, 60 seconds.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say, for me in closing, I mean, this was Gabe's idea. Really appreciate him tabling this, allowing us to kind of experiment a little bit, do something different at Safety Connect, have this live audience. But it was partly too to lift the curtain a little bit, let people know that there's no magic to it, and that the people you see on the screen are here to help as well. So being part of the Safeopedia community, being part of the Safety Connect community, if you're interested, you want to be a guest, like Sarah mentioned, let us know. We'll find the right podcast for you to be a guest on. Might be all of them. And if you're thinking about doing one for your work, professional development, just networking, let us know. I'd love to help you out and help get you started on that path.
Holly, I saw you haven't been asked. Here's your official ask if you want to be on Hard Hats and Hearts.
There you go. Nice. Well, I think the other thing too with podcasts overall, and we didn't have time to touch into this too. I am shocked at the community that builds around a show. I hate to call it a fan base, but definitely it's just like you start to get to know people through it, and it's not even as you being the host of it. It's really just, hey, I like the topic that you were talking about. Great, let's continue the conversation. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, I've been called a safety influencer after my podcast, and I just find that to be the
Oh.
weirdest thing ever whenever I show up to a conference in person and I get referred to as like that safety influencer, Sarah. And I'm kind of like Gabe, where I think it's probably just my mom and maybe my husband listening to the podcast. I forget that people actually do listen to it out in the real world.
Yeah, the internet friends. That's why we're all here. That's why Gabe and Josh and I have a show, is because we're internet friends.
Exactly.
Initially, you know. So it's cool.
It was like
It's
a year and a
definitely
half before we met
platform.
each other in person.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
So
So there you go. It's my magic. And then we'll edit out half of this for the final episode, for the final release.
It was a live show,
Sorry,
man. We have to
Josh.
keep all of it.
Yeah.
I know. Exactly. Cool. Well, Scott, Jamie, thank you for giving us this opportunity for this little campfire chat. Sarah, Gary, Allison, tons of fun. This is, I mean, I actually really enjoy listening to all of your shows.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This has been a real blast.
This is
Awesome.
fun. Yeah. Well, thanks, Gabe.
I'm
for
waiting for
moderating.
that. I'm waiting for that sound of Zoom just going, recording stopped. And then it's like, oh, okay, now I can say all the things I didn't want to say on recording.
Ruin coughs. Yeah.
Okay, now
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the
Drinks.
spot though. Now that we've done the episode, you got to do the intro.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
All right, you ready? All right, so I guess this is the episode where we get to all talk about different shows, about podcasting, and what we love and don't really love about it. So we've got Allison Short, Gary Wong, Sarah Ballini-Ross, Scott Cuthbert, and Jamie is somewhere in the background, somewhere. But this is going to be a fun episode. For everybody that is actually listening to the intro right now, you're probably going to be really confused, but don't worry. If you didn't attend it live, this is the time to tune in. Have a good one.
Cool. Look, that's the
That was
magic.
Recording
done.
stopped.
That's
Beautiful.
We bend time in podcasts.
yeah.
That's another benefit of podcasting. You get to time travel.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And that happened after Scott, I think it was because we were interviewing Abby Ferry. Hey Abby, I know you're in the chat. We were interviewing Abby and we just jumped right into the conversation. And
just
then
started
after
talking.
Abby hung up, Scott and I were just like, oh shoot, maybe we should do an intro.
I
Turned
feel
out
like
to be
some
the
of the
best
best
mistake.
nuggets come after you stop recording the podcast, of like when you and the guest kind of get to have that really informal conversation. And
Oh,
there's been a few
100%.
times where I'm like, I wish we were still recording because that is so gold right there. So
Mhm.
Oh,
it's
we've
just the
had that
joy.
too.
But
Yep.
yeah, that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice is like, don't stop recording.
But be
As
truthful
soon
about
as
it.
you-
Don't
as soon
mess
as
with
you-
people.
As soon as you stop, then yeah, that's Sarah's right. That's when you get the gold.
We stopped recording.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Winky, winky.
Well, and now we can just slip into the lounge. We can just disappear into the crowd here. So
Should I stop the recording then? That's what you're talking about?